Namaste. Please accept my humble obeisances. So I was asked by Devaki Nandana Dasi if I could add a few words to the seminar that you're attending. I think you need, as a parent, to have a really clear idea about your descending priorities, meaning what is the most important thing that you need to focus on in order to fulfill this role. And of course, the most important thing is the foundational understanding that we are actually eternal spiritual beings. These little people that come into our care. The relationship that you have with them is not necessarily at all eternal. In the past, you have had so many children and so many parents, husbands, wives, grandparents, and that in this lifetime has all been forgotten. So it's really important to be cognizant of what is your own goal in life. And that should become the foundation for the nature of your relationship and the responsibilities that you have towards your children, or those people that have come into your care as your children. In the Srimad Bhagavatam, Rishabh Maharaj, who was the incarnation of Krishna, has said that one who cannot deliver his dependents from the path of repeated birth and death should never become a spiritual master, a father, a husband, a mother, or a worshipable demigod. So he clearly lays out what is your highest responsibility. Now we know and understand that a child and every living being has free will. And so one should not think that automatically, just by virtue of being born into a family of devotees, that you are also going to be a devotee. It's absolutely not true at all. That it requires that someone be gradually steered towards what is their highest interest, which is to regain or reconnect or regain this lost relationship with Krishna that we actually all have as part of our eternal nature. And to do that, it's like so important that you have that clarity where you see the children, your children, which are really not your children, with the clarity that these are eternal spiritual beings. And by Krishna's arrangement, you have them as playing the role of your child. So it's like of critical importance that if you are going to be successful in your life as a parent, that this highest goal of their spiritual liberation be what's shaping your relationship. Speaking with some young teenagers on the Gold Coast a few years ago, I had heard that some of them had been complaining to their parents that how come they can't, we're just kids, we're just teenagers, how can't we live as other teenagers do? How come you're not letting us do this and that? It's not fair. Why can't we just be, the teenagers that we are? And so in speaking to them, I told them that the single biggest problem that they have is that they think they are teenagers. That is a monumental problem. The fact that they don't recognize that I'm eternal spiritual being, that my body is not who I am, therefore overly identifying with the body at any stage of its development or growth is simply a product of Maya, a great illusion. And the reason I'm bringing that up is because this is also the biggest problem that parents have, is when they see the children as being their children, when they're not actually children. This is simply a temporary phase that the body is going through. But the eternal spiritual being is not of any particular age of the body associated with the body or an identity associated with the body. And it's so essential for that to be front and center in your life and in your relationship, so that you can have a truly spiritual relationship with your children and to guide them accordingly. I personally felt that the most important thing that my children had to learn, and learn from a really early age, was that they were not the center of the universe. The material condition is that I think that I'm Krishna. I think I'm the center of the universe, that my so-called wants and desires should be attended to before anything else. And I felt that raising the kids to let them understand that, yeah, they have wants and desires that are arising from their bodies and minds, but those wants and desires do not supersede everybody else's wants and desires. That we live as a family unit. We have a direction that we are trying to head in life. And so sometimes you have to take a number, like when you go into some place and you're going to order something, or you're going to have an appointment, an airline ticket, and you get a number. Then you've got to sit there and wait for your number to be called, and then you're attended to. So teaching children to have patience and to be more socially aware. It's not just all about me, that there are other things going on here, and there are other people, and there are priorities, and there is an order for things, and learning where they fit in relation to that is important. What you are teaching them in that regard is not to be overwhelmed by this self-centeredness where it's all about me and what I want, and my desires or wants are like, just the screaming highest priority in the entire world. So teaching people, raising them with a principle of them learning delayed gratification actually makes you stronger as an individual, to realize that I sometimes do have things that I want, but I have to wait to be able to fulfill these wants, simply because they're not, at the top of the list. I think this principle is incredibly important. And as the children grow in age, to teach them this, which is completely against everything that's going on in the world now. All the messaging in the world is to tell people that your desires, your wants should be your highest priority, and you should be doing everything that you can to fulfill them. So learning that you're not the center of the universe and that everything revolves around you also means you're teaching them how to socialize, that if you are going to live in a society and you are going to be, if you raise your children to be simply selfish and self-centered, you're going to make their lives actually really difficult as they grow, because they're going to bump into people that are not their parents and don't give a shit about what they want. And if they haven't learned how to negotiate their way through these types of social environments, they're going to suffer terribly and have a very difficult life. In the beginning of life, Bhaktivedanta Swami Prabhupada used to say, although I'll just preface this, everybody comes with a personality and a type of mentality that's, the product of previous living and previous desires. And so every child is going to have their own way of dealing with things. And whether they're patient or they're really impatient, or whether they're really aggressive or whether they're quite submissive, they're going to have, these different traits. And as a parent, your job is to see beyond those things and to try and help them to live good lives that have good outcomes. So, this whole principle of learning that they are not the center of the universe, to me, that was just like the number one thing to have my duty as a parent, was to make sure that they understood that. And of course, of equal importance is that it is Krishna that is the center of everything. Srila Bhaktivedanta used to say that, children are like a clean slate almost. Of course, you bring that baggage, as I said, with you, certain things. But in a lot of ways, it's a clean slate. And your job as a parent in the early part of their life is to determine what gets written on that blackboard, what they're going to be exposed to, what they're going to experience, and to use that power that you have to try and raise compassionate and kind and self-controlled children. That this is like really important, to teach them spiritual knowledge and spiritual understanding, to teach them how to question. You should encourage children to question, and to question with boldness. People should question everything. Even if you say Krishna is God, and they say, how do I know that Krishna is God? Sometimes parents would get upset if their children said that to them. But that's an amazing question. That's a fantastic question. And it shows someone that's not just accepting things, but is actually processing and thinking. Teaching children how to question everything is also really, really important, I feel, in their life, because this will make it so that they are not so susceptible to their social influence of their peers, other kids that they later get to hang out with. When they ask the question, why should I do that? Why should I follow you in that idea? What's in it for? What's the benefit? And being able to teach people what is sometimes referred to as consequential thinking, meaning if I do that, what's going to happen? I mean, most people have a very short-term idea, and kids especially, teenagers, where they think that going after something is going to produce some happiness. And they don't think beyond that point. Whereas if you teach people to think, okay, once you've got it and you've had that little bit of a rush, then what? What's going to happen as a result of that? Have you thought about this? Have you thought about this? Is that okay with you? That you're going to have a moment of sensory enjoyment, but then there will be all these other consequences attached to that. So are you going to accept that because you can't escape it? Teaching them how to be mindful, not to be just reactive to emotions, that, just reacting to things emotionally is always going to produce bad outcomes. So these are a few of the things. If you as a parent are really cultivating this understanding that Srila Prabhupada is giving us, that we are actually eternal servants of Krishna, temporarily residing in this body, when we are cultivating that understanding, it gives us a view of our lifetime, that we are going through this phase of growing and maturing, and then maintaining for some time, then there's a decline and there's death. If we are conscious of that in our life, then this is something that we can help impart also to our children, and not encourage them not to be swept away by the current situation or environment that they find themselves in. So these are just a few of the things. The main principle I'm mentioning here is that you clearly need a goal in your life. And if your actual goal is to follow Srila Prabhupada and the cultivation of this understanding, and to act on that understanding, to live that kind of life, then this has to be the guiding principle. Your children will at some point potentially disappoint you, and one should learn how to manage that and how to manage difficulty. Chanakya Pandit, he advised that in the first 5 years of a child's life, they can be coddled, but from the age of 5, he said one should impose strict discipline on children, that it's essential for them to grow up and to learn to restrain the senses, and to learn, what it means to be part of a society, to express or to recognize the needs of others and the concerns of others, and see where I fit. And raising a person in a disciplined environment gives your children the best possible chance at life. But then he advised that beyond that age, one should try to become their best friend of the child. All children look for a friend, someone to turn to and to open up to and express their heart. And this is an area where we as parents often fail. Our children go through things, and they might experience things, and, parents get upset, and why didn't you tell me? And it's kind of like, well, you didn't create the environment where they felt they could trust you and open up about stuff. And I think this is an area where we all suffer from, a small or a very large weakness, that children, when they've got problems and they go through teenage years and it's just like all this crazy shit goes on, and they turn to their stupid friends who have no experience in life and confide and share things with them and take advice from them. Bad idea when they need to be turning to their parents. So when a child feels that they are actually loved by their parents no matter what, they are far more inclined to open up and even talk about things that may be difficult. So in that regard, I will just read one more verse from the teachings of Rishabhadeva. If one is serious about going back home, back to Godhead, he must consider the mercy of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the summum bonum, and the chief aim of life. If he is a father instructing his sons, a spiritual master instructing his disciples, or a king instructing his citizens, he must instruct them as I have advised. Without being angry, he should continue giving instructions even if his disciple, son, or citizen is sometimes unable to follow his order. Ignorant people who engage in pious and impious activities should be engaged in devotional service by all means. They should always avoid fruitive activity. And please understand that term, that's the engagement in material activities seeking to derive some sense gratification or material benefit from it. If one puts into the bondage of karmic activity his disciple, son, or citizen who is bereft of transcendental vision, how will one profit? It is like leading a blind man to a dark well and causing him to fall in. So if you do not make the sharing of transcendental knowledge and understanding the main point of your relationship with a person you see as your child, if you don't make that the main point, then you will be in fact like leading a blind man to a dark well and causing him to fall in. So with that, I will bid you good night. It's night here now, and hope you have an enjoyable seminar. You should look at the opportunity to raise children to be devotees of Krishna as being a great blessing, because you will have to be patient, you will have to be intelligent, you will have to be constantly taking shelter in the Lord. You will need to take shelter so that you don't become overwhelmed by Maya and be just looking at them as being your children and relating and behaving to them on that level. And that is not in their interest and won't be helpful. You need to leverage your relationship and the natural affection that children feel for their parents and use it to try and help them come closer to Krishna, to come to love Krishna. Thank you very much. Hari Bol.